This conference will now be recorded.
Thanks, Micah. This is our first workshop after adoption of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, the GSP, by the County of San Diego and the City of San Diego. And this will be our presentation on our annual report for water years 2020 and 2021. My name is Rosalind Prickett. I'm with Woodard & Curran, and I'm supporting the GSAs on the GSP planning process and then implementation process. So let's move to the next slide. Thanks. So I've skipped all of the how to use go-to slides. You all have been with us for the last couple of years and are pretty familiar with this platform. The one change that we do have from some of the meetings that we've been conducting over the last couple of years is that this is a stakeholder workshop and anyone is welcome to ask questions or provide comments at any time. So I'll have a public comment or question slide, kind of a break at the end of each of our agenda items. And then there'll be a more formal public comment period at the end if there's anything else that you want to talk about or raise in that public comment period. So anyone who is wishing to speak up or ask questions, go ahead and place your name in the chat. The chat is that kind of comic book bubble in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. For folks on the phone, go ahead and just speak up when I ask if there are any questions. If there's a lot of background noise and we mute you and it doesn't appear that I can hear you, push *6, that will unmute you so that you can ask your questions. And then after this meeting, any follow-up comments or questions can be sent to Stacy Damasco, and her email is there on the screen. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so our meeting agenda today is a roll call and introductions. I call it roll call because I try to introduce everyone by name so I can get down all of the folks who are participating in our workshops. We'll cover the purpose and objectives of an annual report under SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. We'll give you an overview of report findings, which will address levels, change in storage quality and production. And then, as I mentioned, there'll be a public comment period and you're welcome to speak up then. I want to start with introductions. There's a couple of folks from our core team on the city and the county team that I wanted to introduce because they are new faces. You've seen a couple of emails come out from Stacy Damasco. She has taken over kind of the program management role on our team. And Stacy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Stacy Damasco. I've been with the city about 14 years and just recently took on this role last few months or so, taking over the management actions or the management of the GSP, along with the new Karina, Julie Marlette, who can introduce herself as well.
I'll go ahead and hop in. Thank you, Stacy. Oh, thank you. Yes. So thank you, Stacy. Yes, Julie Marlette, and she put it perfectly. I'm the new Karina Danik. I was recently transitioned into this role as a principal water resources specialist just about 2 months ago, and just very excited to be working with all of you. And I've been with the city about 6 years now.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. And then I also have a new member of Woodard & Curran team who's going to present the overview of the report findings, and that is Amber. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure, yeah. My name is Amber Ritchie. I'm a hydrogeologist with Woodard & Curran. I started with the company in August, and I've been working in California groundwater for about 10 years, so doing a lot of support on different GSPs, annual reports, kind of Central Valley, Southern California, all around the state.
Thanks, Amber. All right. So if we could move on to the next slide. So our meeting objectives for today are to review the annual report findings, as I mentioned, for water years 2020 and 2021. This includes sharing the data that we've collected on groundwater levels and groundwater quality over the course of the last 2 years, evaluating our baseline conditions against the thresholds that we set for ourselves in the GSP, and then reporting out on any implementation, or in our case, planned implementation of the projects and management actions that are in the GSP. Next slide. So the purpose and objectives, go ahead. SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, requires submittal of an annual report each April 1st, each year following adoption of the GSP. So as you know, we adopted the GSP in December 2021 and January 2022. So this is our first annual report. The annual report provides the information on groundwater conditions and implementation for the prior water year. And a water year runs from October 1st through September 30th. Our first annual report, although it's traditionally a single water year that our annual reports will cover, this one actually covers 2 water years because the data in our GSP went through 2019 and we wanted to catch up and sort through and organize all of the groundwater levels and groundwater quality data from the last 2 water years. So you'll see that that we are reporting out on both water years in this presentation. Next slide. This is the SGMA requirements for the annual reports. There's a number of different things that must be specifically addressed, and there's a checklist that the state goes through. And they also require that we take the data, the numerical data, and actually upload it into the state's database. They're going through and compiling all of this data for all of the different GSPs and medium and high priority basins throughout the state. So they want us to report out on groundwater conditions in terms of contour maps and hydrographs, groundwater production by sector, which includes some mapping, surface water supply use and total water use by sector, changes in groundwater storage, which include maps and graphics showing both annual and cumulative change. And then, as I said, progress toward GSP implementation, which is the status of those management actions that we included in our plan. Next slide. So here's just a little graphic depiction of the process, the kind of SGMA process that we're in right now. You can see in 2016, that first green box there was when the GSA, the multi-agency GSA, the city and the county established themselves as a GSA. In 2021, that second box is when our GSP was first adopted. That blue bar shows our GSP baseline period. So all of the historical analysis that we did in the GSP included the years 2005 to 2019. And then the gray, dark gray bar to the right of the plan is our implementation timeframe according to SGMA. So between 2022 and 2042, we're required to do annual reports. You can see those in that, that dark green box there, which essentially report out on all of the items I listed on the previous slide for each water year. And then we're also required to do 5-year updates. You can see those in the very bottom of the graph there, where we anticipate spending, it takes 4-ish years to 3 years, I think we've got on there, to compile all of the information needed and update the GSP. Next slide. So are there any questions about context, background, objectives of our workshop today? Okay, I don't see any hands up or items in the chat. So next slide, I think we'll go on to the overview of report findings. That's you, Amber.
Great, thanks. So first we looked at precipitation and groundwater production. So to look at precipitation per water year, we used PRISM data, which is a climatic data set that uses point data and the digital elevation model to calculate precipitation across the basin. So water year 2020, which again, October 1st through September 30th is a water year. Precipitation 2020 was 22.0 inches, which classifies it as a wet year. And then water year 2021, we had 6.9 inches of precipitation, which classifies it as a critically dry year. So these water year classifications are set forth by DWR, and they're using a quantile system. So there's 5 classifications, critically dry, dry, normal, above normal, and wet. And so a wet year represents that for the historical period, this was in the top 20% of precipitation by year. And for critically dry year, it was in the bottom 20% of precipitation for the historical period. And so moving to production, on the right, you can see a land use map for the basin, primarily agriculture, as we know. And to estimate groundwater production, we use the GSP model approach, which shows that demand is based on land use and population, and it assumes no change from 2020 conditions. So we're assuming that this land use is staying constant. It excludes imported applied water, and it considers water year type and ET. So the assumptions that climatic conditions are going to change the amount of groundwater that you need. Next slide. So moving on to groundwater levels. We'll show a zoom in map of these two figures on the next couple slides, but what we have are two groundwater level contour maps for fall and for spring. And what we're seeing is that there are similar groundwater flow patterns seasonally and for both water years. So groundwater flow is from east to west, and there's not any change in groundwater flow direction based on wet or dry years or seasonal highs and lows. And we have our seasonal high groundwater levels in the spring and then seasonal low groundwater levels in the fall. And what we're showing, and you can kind of, you can see this on an example hydrograph on the right, which is one of our representative groundwater level monitoring wells in the basin. And we're seeing recovery during water years 2019 and 2020. And those are, 2019 is an above normal water year, 2020 is a wet year. And so you see that on the hydrograph that groundwater levels are rebounding when you have, a period of one or more wet years in a row. And when you have these longer periods, you're seeing more of a change. And then we see declining levels during water year 2021, which again was our critically dry year. And so from the hydrograph, you can see, for example, the drought of 2014, 2015, when we had a dry and a critically dry year, you're seeing these extended groundwater level declining levels, and then you're recovering when you have wet periods. And looking at this figure, we're plotting the groundwater levels in the well and also the MTs, which are the minimum thresholds, the PTs, the planning thresholds, and then the MOs, which are the measurable objectives. And so looking at all of the representative monitoring wells, the groundwater levels did not exceed the minimum thresholds or the planning thresholds. And the groundwater levels for several wells were shallower than the measurable objectives, which is great. It's kind of is representing more of a basin full condition. And then the PTs are being used as kind of an alarm that things are getting low and we may need to move into some of our management actions. And then the MTs is what we have to stay above due to sigma. You can move to the next slide. So this is the figure that was on the left in the previous slide, just zoomed in. So a few things to notice is this is fall, so again, seasonal low, and we see the groundwater gradient is moving, groundwater flow from east to west. And then we also have this kind of depression in the middle where you see the well labeled 324. And so what this is representing is the highest production area in the basin. And so there are several production wells in this area, and then the depression caused by that pumping is captured in that monitoring well. Next slide. And next we have spring 2020, which is the seasonal high. And so you can see that groundwater flow direction is the same. It stays east to west. And you also see that depression there. So it's kind of, it's not related to any seasonal or any water year. It's just where the production is highest in every water year. And you're also seeing that these levels are slightly higher than in fall. For an example, the furthest well on your lower left is 316 and it was 313 in the fall. And then you see 392 in the top right, and that was 378. So what you're seeing is this rebounding of water levels on a seasonal basis. Next slide. All right, next we went into change in storage. So we looked at the change in storage for both water years in our annual report, 2020 and 2021. And again, we'll show zoomed in figures of these on the right in just a moment. But so the blue color is an annual increase in storage, and the green and the yellow is a decrease in storage. And so for water year 2020, we had an increase in storage, which this was a wet year, so that was expected. Calculated storage change was 942 acre feet. And then water year 2021, the critically dry year, we saw a decrease in storage of negative 409 acre feet. And then the chart on the bottom shows the dark blue bars represent the annual change in groundwater storage, plotted against the orange line, which is the cumulative change in storage. And then we also added light blue represents the annual groundwater use in the basin. So what we see is that we have a cumulative change that's higher now than it was in 2019, which was the end of baseline. So if you follow the orange line from water year 2019 to 2021, we've increased a bit, which is showing that, again, this rebound in storage after you have an above normal followed by a wet year in 2019 and 2020. And then we see a slight decline after 2021, the critically dry year. And what we're showing with the dark blue bars is that the storage is directly related to water years, as I mentioned. So you see these bars moving in the negative direction in dry and critically dry years, and then moving in the positive direction in the wet and above normal years. And there's also somewhat of a, you see a relationship with the pumping based on water year. Pumping is always roughly between 5,000 and 7,000 acre feet per year, but you see these higher numbers closer to 7,000 acre feet per year in your dry and critically dry years. You can see that in 2007, 2013, and then again in 2021. Next slide. So this is a zoomed in map of the water year 2020 storage. And so these blue, this is representing about 0.5 to 1.5 feet per grid cell. So what this means is that from fall 2019 to fall 2020, water levels rose about 0.5 foot to 1.5 feet in the respective location. Then we can move on to the next slide, which shows the same thing for water year 2021. And so you see here we range from about -2 to positive 0.5. So again, we're having a net loss in storage between -2 and then a few grid cells kind of in the 0.5 area near this pumping depression in the central location. Okay, next slide. Okay, so for groundwater quality, so we had two constituents of concern that were placed forth in the GSP, and those were TDS and nitrate. So these two figures show the representative water quality monitoring network wells and the sample results for water year 2021. So the green dots represent there was no MT exceedance in that sample. The orange dot shows that there was an MT exceedance. And then the black dots where the wells were not sampled as we're kind of starting up this monitoring network. So for TDS, there was one exceedance, and that was in well SP065. And then there were 3 nitrate exceedances. That same well also that had a TDS exceedance also had a nitrate exceedance. And then there were 2 others, SP043 and SP003. And as you can see on the figure, they're kind of all in this central area of the basin that represents the poorest water quality within the basin. Next slide. Okay, so looking at groundwater production. So for the 2 water years, we related water year type, and then we showed pumping. So as you can see, the vast percentage of pumping in the basin is for agricultural use. And this also equates to less pumping in the wet year and more pumping in the critically dry year. And domestic pumping remains steady, which is just based upon the model that assumes a per capita use in a steady population within the basin. And this figure shows pumping overlaid by which section the production well is in. And so you can see that the highest production of about 1,500 acre feet is in this central area, and that corresponds to where we saw the pumping depression in all of the water level maps. And then you can see there's a few areas that do not have production, mostly on the outskirts of the basin, and that's either because there are no production wells in that section, or there are production wells, but they did not pump during that water year. Next. Okay, so then we looked at total water use. So these numbers from groundwater you saw on the previous slide. There's no surface water in the basin, so these numbers were 0. Excuse me. And then imported applied water for agricultural purposes is imported from the city of Escondido. And we saw 100 acre feet in water year 2020 and 114 acre feet in water year 2021. And so you can see from the chart that 98% of the water in the basin is groundwater and 2% is imported water. Next slide. Okay, so my last slide is going through the GSP implementation. So you can see the management actions put forth here, and there are several that are continuous. And these continuous management actions are being performed on an ongoing basis with the city's public utility department, coordinating with the city's other departments. So these are management action 3, which is to support the water quality improvement plan. Management action 4, to coordinate and collaborate regionally with other entities to perform monitoring and implement regional projects. And management action 6, which is to coordinate with city on Hodges watershed improvement project. And then there are a few others that are starting up this year and continuing. Management action 5 is the education and outreach for TDS and nitrate, which is planned for this year. Then management action 7, the initial surface water recharge evaluation, which is beginning this year and will continue through 2024. And then the last one, the management action 8, is the study of groundwater dependent ecosystems. This is the phase 1 desktop study, which is also planned for this year. And then I think we have another question period coming up now.
Thanks, Amber. Are there any questions on the results of the annual report analysis?
This is Peter Quinlan. I have a couple. I can't figure out, raise my hand on this.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Amber, you showed that you calculate that the groundwater storage, the water levels increased somewhat in the pumping depression in the dry year. And I was wondering what your thoughts were about that, since it seems to be that you're also showing pumping increased during the dry year as opposed to the wetter year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that area in particular is these rasters for change in storage were made by subtracting the groundwater contours. So those positive values were such a small incremental value that it could just be where that contour is kind of, it's the same contour for the same elevation. It's just shifted a little bit, whether, you know, they're tighter around that depression. It could also be, you know, during really dry years, they're pumping more, but maybe not from those wells. So there's data from, you know, a lot of different wells, and the biggest pumping wells aren't necessarily pumping the most every water year.
Okay. And you're estimating the pumping using the model calculated demand based on ET and crop type.
Correct.
Have you cross-checked that with the metered data for pumping?
Yeah, so there's not metered data pumping for every well. So that's kind of one of the data gaps we're trying to fill in with the implementation of this GSP. And so what we're doing is we're applying in areas where we don't have pumping, we're applying pumping for a similar water year type from a previous year.
Yeah, I understand that you don't have it for all the wells. I'm just wondering whether you spot check it for those areas where you do have metered data. You know, in a cell, you have a well and you have metered data, and whether you're just cross-checking it on a spot check.
Yeah, we are. There are definitely some inconsistencies in the data that we're trying to work out and kind of, you know, get that in a better format as we move on through these annual reports.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the annual report findings?
I think there's a lot of great information. I thought the simplicity of how she relayed it was really easy to follow. Will the slides be available, do you think?
Will, yeah, they're already up on our on the San Pasqual Valley GSP program website, which is hosted by the County of San Diego. So I can forward you the link to that, Marisa.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation.
Sure. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
This is Ricky. I couldn't find the chat either. I had a question about the schedule for Management Action 7.
Yes.
And the question, I thought I had it up here and now I don't. The question really was, is there a step in which you will be evaluating the whatever policy and institutional constraints might exist with respect to using water out of Sutherland?
Yes, as part of the identification. So for those of you who aren't following this question, one of the management actions that is included in the plan here, Management Action 7, is the initial surface water recharge evaluation, which considers different water sources that could be available for recharge to the basin, including potential discharges from Sutherland Dam. And so the task that evaluates those water sources will include an evaluation of institutional and operational constraints.
Which task is that?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know. Ricky, I can go back to the last workshop in November of 2021 where we presented the list of tasks, and I can forward that.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Whoever's getting the call can mute. Okay, I can do that, Ricky. Okay, it looks like I have one more chat here.
Angela,
like
comment.
Yeah. You have a comment, Angela?
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Sure can.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my name is Angela Islas. I am a new project manager with Civic WOW, formerly Local Government Commission in Sacramento. I'm representing the water team here today in this discussion. I've done a lot of previous CIVMA work in the San Joaquin Valley region, which I'll be continuing on as well in this new role. So just wanted to, show my face and let everybody know that I'll be definitely supporting a lot of the work that the water team has been doing with this basin on SIGMA, and congratulations again for passing your GSP and definitely, getting through this annual report setup. So my congratulations to you all. But I did have a quick question about this slide that you're on 21 on management actions. So around management action 5, I was wondering in terms of like education on these contaminants that you're going to be, I'm assuming that these are the contaminants that the GSP is going to be following. Is that correct?
These are the contaminants for which we've established thresholds in the GSP.
Okay. I was wondering as well if that also includes sort of like a mitigation strategy in terms of how it would be sort of, I guess, remediated in terms of like, with wells that are affected with nitrate or TDS, if there's something there that would support with those types of contaminants that are above the maximum contaminant level. I was just wondering if that was a component that would be within the education.
It sure will. Actually, the way that we've structured Management Action 5 in the GSP is an emphasis on the domestic wells that are located within the basin, and kind of education and outreach to those well users to make sure that they understand what the risks are with high TDS and nitrate levels, and what types of mitigation strategies are available for them, and what programs they could use to mitigate. any sort of elevated levels within their wells. So all of that kind of information will be made available to those folks.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, that's glad. I'm glad to hear that. Out of curiosity, is that something as well that is being, I guess, thought about in terms of groundwater levels? I know some of the basins here in the San Joaquin Valley, I mean, given they're not in your position, they are in a critically overdrafted position, which is really bad. But I know some of them have been thinking about also applying a mitigation kind of strategy within groundwater level, like any issues that they have with groundwater levels that like meet the minimum threshold. So I was wondering if that's something that y'all in this basin are thinking about too, or have thought about.
At this point, we aren't. At this point, we aren't reporting out on any of the management actions that aren't going to be implemented, at least in the next calendar year or water year, excuse me. The way that the GSP was structured for San Pasqual Valley was that if there are some exceedances of our thresholds for groundwater levels, that we kind of move into different tiers of project implementation. That's where we start looking more aggressively at metering and at potential pumping restrictions, developing a plan for that, things like that. At this point, the basin's sustainable and everyone, you know, can continue pumping as they have been historically. Our modeling showed that under the historical conditions, the basin should be just fine. So we have some of those projects in the plan, but at this point they aren't needed.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for answering my questions.
Of course. Yeah, my pleasure. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. So that was the majority of our presentation on the annual report. It's a relatively simple document in terms of just, you know, the time that it takes us to just compile the information and put it into the format that DWR would like to see. We wanted to let you know that we've also taken all of that data from the annual report and we've added it into the San Pasqual Valley data management system. Stacy sent out a couple of emails to stakeholders about how to access that data management system, which includes all of our groundwater levels and quality data that we used in the planning process. And then now it also includes our annual report data. And that can also be accessed from the program website. I think the next slide actually has the links on it if you're interested in seeing those. There they are. So the first item is our San Pasqual Valley GSP website. This is where all of the meeting materials, the link to the data management system, a link to the plan itself, a link to the annual report, everything is uploaded here so that you can access that anytime you'd like. The San Pasqual Valley GSP itself is also located on the Sigma portal that is maintained by the state. We had to upload that to the Sigma portal. And then the annual report has also been uploaded to the Sigma portal. So you can see here the links to those documents. And then last is our data management system. And you're welcome to go and kind of explore through there, which shows lots of different kinds of data and then some of our output graphs. And then last slide, Micah. We also wanted to let you all know that our next stakeholder workshop is being planned for June 8th of this year from 1 to 3 in the afternoon, so save the date for that. We're planning to kick off the management action number 7, the initial surface recharge evaluation. And at this first workshop, we're planning to discuss evaluation criteria for the feasibility analysis for that management action. Are there any questions? All right. Anyone else have anything that they'd like to share with the group? Mike, I don't know if we skipped over the public comment, the formal public comment slide, but if anyone has any public comments. Okay, hearing none, thank you for spending 45 minutes of your day with us. Any follow-up comments, like I said earlier, can be sent over to Stacy. And If you need her email, that's in the presentation that is on our San Pasqual Valley GSP website. So thank you, everybody. You have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you all.
You as well. Thanks so much. We have a great